The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
There was another special election yesterday, this one in Ohio's 12th district. And as of just minutes ago, the race still officially too close to call, although the Republican candidate in the official results is ahead by about 1,700 votes. But this is still massive, massive news, and the Republicans are trying to downplay it. But the big news wouldn't be that the Republican won if the Republican does end up winning by the current count of, like I said, 1,700 votes. The news is the Republican didn't win easily because this is a hugely, massively red district, 87% white district that hasn't had a Democratic representative since 1983, 35 years ago, before I was born, and certainly before Pat was born, and in total has had only one Democratic representative dating all the way back to 1939. 79 years you have to go back for the second Democratic representative in Ohio's 12th district. And more impressively, only one of the last 41 terms were held by a Democrat. Of course, when you consider the number of terms that the Republicans have served compared to the Democrats, you have to go back to 1939, not just for the second Democrat to control this district, to be the representative for this district, but just for the second term during which the seat was filled by a Democrat. As I mentioned, the voting results as of very, very recently, just hours ago, 1,700 votes separating Republican Troy Balderson from Democrat Danny O'Connor. And as of right now, even if the Republican ekes out this victory, whether it's 1,700 votes or 2,200 or 1,300, pending a recount, absentee ballots that still have to be counted, as well as provisional ballots, this is a red flag for Republicans in November. Does this mean Republicans need to assume Democrats have it in the bag? No. Does this mean Democratic voters can stay home because Democrats are just going to kill it in November? Absolutely and totally not. Does this mean that if something big happens, like Trump invading Iran, Republicans can't have massive gains because of those bogus talking points, like you can't switch horses midstream when it comes to military engagements? No, all of that stuff can happen. But what it does mean is that this is a big change of direction in a massively red district. Republicans had to spend millions in this race to eke out what is maybe a 1,700 vote victory. You had here a race that Donald Trump won this district easily. Mitt Romney won this district easily, and it was so tight that Trump personally went to Ohio to campaign for the Republican over the last few days, and still we have the possibility that the Democrat could win, although not hugely likely based on the number of votes. This is very bad news for Republicans, cautiously, potentially good news for Democrats, but I don't want a single Democrat in any district thinking it's okay to stay home because of these results.
Right, because past performance isn't necessarily indicative of future results.
Sure.
So maybe the best attitude we can have when it comes to this is just to treat all races as if they're 50-50. Like, we do have a shot at winning this, but you have to go out and vote. You can't rest on your laurels.
According to the Cook Political Report, there are right now, of the 435 House seats, all of which, of course, are up for re-election, there are 68 seats that are currently held by Republicans that are more in favor of Democrats than Ohio's 12th district. Democrats need 23 seats in the House, a net gain of 23, to take control of the House. And 68 Republican seats right now have better numbers for the Democratic candidate than the Ohio 12th congressional district. That is maybe part of, if we had to come up with, like, is there anything good about Trump being in the White House? There's very little good about it, right? If there's anything that we can say might be a positive side effect of Trump being in the White House, it's that it's created a little bit of space for some progressive ideas to be floated around. And it turns out that a lot of those ideas are really popular, and more popular with Republicans than maybe we were pretending for a very long time. There's new polling which points out that a federal jobs guarantee has more than 50% support nationally. That means that there are Republicans who support it. Community job creation programs, more than 50% of the country supports it. Government producing generic pharmaceutical drugs, more than half the country supports it. A public internet utility, basic health care services for all. Every single one of those ideas has higher than 50% support, sometimes way higher than 50% support. And one advantage, I would say the one advantage to Trump in the White House has been that some Democrats, especially some of the more progressive candidates, have decided to just say the things that they're for, when before they might have been more posturing and coy and calculating politically. Not that that's a good thing, but it's good that they're now actually saying these are things that I'm for. And what we are finding is that among moderate Republicans, some of these ideas are actually relatively popular. So it's a good sign for Democrats in the fall. It's not a good sign for Republicans, but nothing is guaranteed. And I think Pat's idea of consider every seat 50-50. If you think about it as it's 80% chance that the Republican wins, you might stay home. If you think about it as it's 80% chance that the Democrat wins, you also might stay home. Think of every race as 50-50. Nothing is guaranteed. Get out there. And in the context of looking at data to figure out what might be happening in the midterms, there's one other big piece of news from last night, which is that for the first time ever, voters have blocked one of those horrible right-to-work laws that was passed by Republicans. It's massive, and that's what I want to talk about next. So we had some elections last night, and along with Republicans barely and only possibly holding a very red seat last night in Ohio, the other big news that I have is that for the first time, voters have successfully repealed one of those horrible right-wing right-to-work laws, this time in the state of Missouri. What is right to work? Right to work laws exist in 27 states, would have been 28 if it weren't for yesterday's vote in Missouri. And what right to work laws do is they prevent union security agreements between unions and companies by guaranteeing workers can't be forced as a condition of taking a particular job to join and have to pay dues to a union or not join a union, right? They can't be forced either way. But this is kind of a red herring because federal law already makes it illegal to force people to join unions. And without getting into the minutia and the specifics of exactly how these laws work, the long and short of it is that right-to-work laws are great for corporate power. They take away power and the ability to negotiate collectively for workers for their benefit. And Republicans passed such a law in Missouri, and yesterday voters voted to block the law. This was called Proposition A in yesterday's election in Missouri. It would have made it illegal for unions to charge fees for workers they represent who don't want to pay them. And it was defeated by a roughly 2-to-1 margin in Missouri. This is a massive, massive victory. At no time in American history has a right-to-work law been overturned by popular referendum. We can talk about it economically. We can talk about it politically. Economically, this is good. Economists have studied right-to-work laws for a while, and what they found is they don't help the economy. There's a study from Hofstra which shows that right-to-work becomes sort of a wash for the economy in total, but it shifts some money away from workers and towards business owners. Or I guess we would say it shifts it up, the opposite of trickle down. It's trickle up, I guess we would call it. The Economic Policy Institute says that right to work has lowered wages by about 3% for both union and non-union workers, and economically, it's not a good thing. The political perspective is sort of like Ohio's 12th district results, right? This is a signal about how the November midterms might go, because when you look at the county level results for the repeal of this right to work law in Missouri, counties in Missouri, even counties that voted for Trump in big numbers, like 60-40 Trump-Hillary, 70-30 Trump-Hillary, they voted to repeal right to work. And that is really important because there are people who claim that a platform of economic justice and real progressive populism wouldn't work in red states. Sure, that might work in the district where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is running, but that's not going to work in red districts. If framed correctly, economic populism and economic justice can work in those red districts. The problem is that it's becoming toxically partisan, And people don't realize that they're voting against their own best interest. In Missouri, good results here.
Yeah, and I think they did frame the issue correctly with the No on Prop A campaign here in Missouri. You just got to show that in the right-to-work states, that means less money for the workers, more money for the CEOs, and that just feels unjust to people. You can easily make that case that it's not fair.
Now, the next step, the next awakening that would be great for Missouri Republicans to have is, okay, let's see. We didn't want the right-to-work law, and Republicans did. That means that when I vote in November, I should not vote for those same Republicans, because those are the people that are going to try and try again. Because remember, they only have to get it through once for it to become the law. We have to vote it down every single time to prevent it from becoming the law. And Republicans know this. So the next layer in fighting the cognitive dissonance and realizing that what you do in November also relates to right to work is to remember, if I don't want right to work, I shouldn't, after having voted down right to work in August, go in November and vote for the exact same people that are going to try it again. I don't know if that's going to happen, because we still see that the partisan nature of those midterms gets a lot of people voting down party lines. What we do realize is that the Republican voters don't actually agree with the policy of the Republican candidates that by and large they're going to vote for in November.
And those Republican voters in the middle of the country are by and large against Trump's tariffs, right?
Yes.
Combine that with this new Democratic message of economic justice, I think you can turn a lot of them over.
There's two explanations. One is ignorance. They don't understand that if they're against the tariffs and against right to work, that you shouldn't vote for Republicans. There's another interpretation, which is less negative, I guess we would say, which is they get it, but there are some overarching issues that for them are just more important. Like, for example, for religious voters, what about abortion? And it might just be that determines who they vote for more than the economic policy. I think in different states, in different counties, in different districts, it's probably to different proportions, one or the other. There are some interesting races that we're going to be covering in these midterms. We're going to be doing more candidate interviews. I will be running for you soon my interview with J.D. Scholten, who's running in Iowa against extremist, depraved, disgusting doofus Steve King. And also my interview from Netroots Nation with current Congressman Tim Ryan, who's a Democrat in Ohio. Very enlightened guy. He knows about mindfulness meditation. He understands Medicare for all and modern monetary theory. So I interviewed him in New Orleans over the weekend, and we're going to be running my interview with him soon.
I may have to move to Ohio just so I have the opportunity to vote for him.
Well, where he represents, it's pretty economically ravaged. So I'm not saying it's a bad place. We actually have a lot of viewers in that district and an affiliate station. But I don't know for sure that it's the place that Pat Ford wants to live in, right? It's not a bad place. Every place is great and everything's wonderful and all of that stuff. But I think that, you know, you're probably doing okay in Boston. Okay, send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show. And we do have Hatriot Mail coming up after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Big thank you to Wade Barbara. Wade is today's new David Pakman Show member of the day. If you like the program, if you want to support the program, if you want to fight back against the concerted effort that the current administration is making to attack critical, independent, and progressive media, support the program. Go to www.joinpakman.com. Today's sustaining member of the day is Andreas Adurzio. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. It's got two dots over the O at the end, but I'm not sure how that affects pronunciation. But it's definitely Andreas. Wade and Andreas, great people.
Member since 2013, Andreas. You had 5 years to learn the pronunciation.
I know, and I still don't know how it's pronounced. But we welcome and love our international members. You can also make a pledge of as little as $1 a month on Patreon at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Okay, it is time for Hatriot Mail. If you haven't ever heard Hatriot Mail before, it is when a professional deep voice movie announcer reads the hate mail that I get.
Hey, let's face it. The only logical response to guns is more f***ing guns. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America.
Yep.
And because freedom.
All right, so some of the themes of Hatriot Mail, as many of you know, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, homophobia, and today I guess we could say it's sort of homophobia,
Yeah, kind of.
but also kind of gender stereotype, just kind of like stupid comments about gender. Let's take a listen to it.
The Pakman Cult. I can picture what a room full of you would look like. Sad bunch drooling over this clown. You can tell Pakman is the preppy narcissist from back in everyone's school days. He lost his following when school ended, so he turns to the internet to find more minions. He's just a feminine metrosexual with no real men as followers. And this is where he will fail, along with his Antifa wenches.
It's so funny because we have the opposite problem. There's this very difficult, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Nut to crack when it comes to news shows like ours, where the audience is overwhelmingly male, to the point where advertisers know that, and any product that is at least 50% expected to be marketed to women, or any product that is specifically marketed to women, they don't want to advertise on programs like ours because the audience is like 70 to 75% male. Now, I know what the person's saying. Just because you're male doesn't mean you're a, quote, real man. So I get what they're saying. But in reality, the problem is there's too many men in our audience.
Unfortunately, we don't yet have the demographics for how many of those men are real men.
Yeah, I know.
So we'll have to find that out.
I don't even know how you would check that, but I'm guessing that if we wanted to hire this Hatriot to consult, he could help us figure out how do you identify a real man? Make Hatriots cry by using the coupon code Hatriot40 to sign up for membership. You can go to www.joinpakman.com, pick any membership, and when you check out, type in HATRIOT40, 40, and you'll save 40% off of your membership, and 72 Hatriots will cry. 72 Hatriots will cry. Some of you will recognize where that number comes from. The FCC has increasingly become a force for evil under the Trump administration, not the least of which is because of their opposition to net neutrality regulations, which, as you know, from the Obama era have been repealed by Trump's FCC. And the big news this week, this is a major story, and it's not getting as much coverage as it should, partially because some people don't recognize how big it is, partially because there were like 10 other scandals in the last 48 hours. The big news is that the FCC has admitted this week it wasn't actually hacked. You might remember that back during the public comment period around the net neutrality repeal, the FCC said we are going to have a period of, I don't remember how many weeks it was, during which people can write in and they can tell us, we want you to repeal net neutrality or we don't want you to repeal net neutrality. And the FCC claimed that a DDoS attack, a denial of service attack, a hack, took down the public comment system. And as a result, the system went down, right? We got hacked. The system went down. We can't take public comments. Sorry. However, former Verizon lawyer and current FCC chairman Ajit Pai has now admitted there was no hack. It simply wasn't true. And here's the just absolute goldmine. Ajit Pai is blaming the Obama administration because even though the lie was made during the Trump administration and by the Trump FCC while trying to repeal Obama-era net neutrality regulations, Ajit Pai says that the Trump FCC inherited a culture from the Obama administration, which led to the lying. So listen, it's basically Obama. So Obama might as well have been personally lying as far as Ajit Pai is concerned here.
Thanks, Obama. He did it again.
What happened to personal responsibility? What happened to the buck stops with the person at the top? And the FCC and Ajit Pai have been repeating this lie for a year or more at this point, that a hack took down the comment system. So tons of people who wanted to comment about the net neutrality repeal couldn't. And it just wasn't true. The FCC Inspector General investigated, found that the claim of a hack was a total lie. And of course, the real reason that the system went down, there's sort of two possibilities. One is much worse than the other, okay? Possibility one is that so many millions of Americans were against the net neutrality repeal that they wanted to make their voices heard, period. And that led to so much traffic that the comment section went down on the FCC's website. That's like the less sinister explanation. The more sinister explanation is that the FCC took down the comment section to prevent those comments from being made in the first place. And we don't know which one it is. As far as the so-called apology goes, this could be one of the most bogus apologies we've heard recently. I apologize for the fact that an Obama person lied. The follow-up part of this is whether Ajit Pai knew he was lying all along. Ajit Pai is saying that's a conspiracy theory. He included in his statement about this the following quote, "I'm pleased that this report debunks the conspiracy theory that my office or I had any knowledge that the information provided by the former CIO was inaccurate and was allowing that inaccurate information to be disseminated for political purposes." We'll see whether that's a conspiracy theory. It's kind of hard for me to believe that Ajit Pai and the higher-ups at the FCC were told this is a hack. They had a ton of data to review related to whether it was a hack. They looked at the data, presumably, and they still came away thinking it was a hack when there was no actual evidence that they got hacked. I don't know that I believe that Ajit Pai wasn't just parroting something he knew wasn't true.
Yeah, signs show, I think, that this was taken down deliberately, and then you'd have to hold Ajit Pai accountable for that. And just, it goes to this bigger picture that even though it's the FCC and they're the government, they're supposed to be working for the people, they don't really care what you have to say. If you disagree with them, they'll take you down, they'll shut you down. They just want to listen to the corporate interests.
That's the bummer at the bottom line, which is we're sort of debating over what was the reason why people against repealing net neutrality weren't able to make the comments. The truth is that even if they were able to make the comments, it was getting repealed either way, right? Like the FCC never cared what public opinion was. They and Ajit Pai are tools of the NCTA, the cable lobby, and the ISPs, and everybody else who has a financial interest in repealing net neutrality. And it's silly to even pretend like, oh, you know, if they had just gotten 500,000 or 1 million more comments against the repeal, they wouldn't have repealed it. Of course not. They were repealing it no matter what. And I actually want to take it a step further. This is something that is resignation worthy in my mind. When we talk about creeping authoritarianism and the authoritarian slide under the Trump administration, it's really scary to realize that a federal agency can lie to everybody about what happened, possibly knowingly, use that lie to say that they, or to effectively ignore the opposition to what they're doing, which is the killing of net neutrality. They later admit that it was a lie, but they get to keep the repeal as if the lie is irrelevant. And the truth is that in the end, the lie is irrelevant because the comments were going to be irrelevant and Ajit Pai should be fired. The buck should stop with him. Personal responsibility. He's in charge. Blaming the culture of the Obama administration for this is a joke. And at worst, they took down the comment section, which is a form of, if they did it deliberately, government limiting free expression.
Well, Ajit Pai could, in theory, be impeached by the Senate. Only problem is those senators are also bought and paid for by the ISPs and the telecom companies.
I would not hold my breath for even 10 seconds, hoping that the Republican Senate is going to punish Ajit Pai for lying. That is, I mean, it's inconceivable that that would take place. So, are you surprised about this? Not really. Are we dismayed by it? We are. But it is just yet another instance of this decided and definitive creep towards authoritarianism and a government that eliminates checks and balances, ignores the will of the people. And this is what we've got to look forward to if Democrats don't take over the House and Senate in 2018. And certainly if Donald Trump is reelected in 2020, it is going to continue creeping to the point where we might call it, what's the next thing after creeping? Walking? I don't know.
I think it's there.
It's there. You're just at authoritarianism. We'll eventually get there. That's exactly right. Discuss this with us on the David Pakman Show subreddit, davidpakman.com/REDDIT. And if you're not following the show on Instagram at David Pakman Show, please do. I will be answering questions there after today's show. Submit your question at David Pakman Show on Instagram.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by author and entrepreneur Andrew Yang, who's running as a Democrat for president in 2020 on a platform of universal basic income, Medicare for all, and human-centered capitalism, all issues I've talked quite a bit about. Andrew, thanks for talking to me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start with UBI. I mean, I guess there's so many ways we could enter that conversation, but maybe one way would be, what specific problem do you believe UBI solves?
Well, the most pressing issue that people who are looking at the economy are focused on is the automation of labor, where we've automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin between 2000 and 2015. And I'm sitting here in Silicon Valley. We're about to do the same thing to workers in retail, transportation and truck driving, call centers, fast food, and on throughout the economy. But the great thing about universal basic income is not just that it's necessary because we're going through this transition, but also that it's going to improve the day-to-day lives of tens of millions of American individuals, families, and households, where people will be able to pay their bills, start saving some money, save for their children's education, potentially move and even start a new business. So there are a lot of upsides to universal basic income. But the thing that certainly galvanized my attention to it is the fact that our economy is changing for good because of advancing technology.
So under your plan, you're talking about $1,000 a month per person, $12,000 for the year. Would that replace other social welfare benefits, or would it be in addition to?
It would largely be in addition to it, because if you look at our social programs right now, they're not really doing the job. But we will get some money from existing social programs, because if someone's already receiving significant benefits, it's not necessarily the case that the $1,000 a month would be layered on top. So, for example, if someone was receiving $700 in food stamps and housing assistance, they would get trued up to $1,000 if they decided to opt for the freedom dividend, but it's not like they'd be getting an additional $1,000. So that will help bring the costs of the universal basic income down significantly, because so many people are currently receiving benefits.
I want to talk about some of the possible reasons why UBI may not work as well as some think that it would. And to be clear, my audience knows I've been talking about UBI for years and years. I've done a ton of interviews about it. I've also looked into, other possibilities like a negative income tax, different types of tax credit situations. One of my concerns with UBI is that it wouldn't change the underlying sort of vulture capitalist problems that exist. It wouldn't really move us towards a different type of economy. It's just, hey, everybody gets 12K, or adjusted, of course, depending on the particular circumstances. And one of the maybe negative consequences would be that we see a $19,000 full-time job, or we should, as completely outrageous. But if you're getting 12K from the government, that might allow the corporation that's paying $19,000 for a full-time job to be subject to less criticism, because, hey, it's really 31 with that other 12K.
Yeah, so there are a couple of points in there, David, and I know you're one of the first people who figured out that universal basic income could be an incredible way to advance our society over time. So if you think about it, we're experiencing these epic gains from new technologies with Amazon and Google and these other companies harvesting incredible profits really for themselves. And so universal basic income is a great way to distribute that bounty throughout society. And while you're right that there are dynamics of this winner-take-all economy that universal basic income won't address, it seems to me like that universal basic income would make it so that everyone can share in the dividends of progress quite directly. And so if you imagine how it could work out in an ideal world, people are able to build a more human-centered economy in their communities. And then as technology improves, people are getting more and more of those gains. And this is the first big step in that direction. In terms of corporations and people possibly having to take less money, I think that you should look at it from the ground up, which is that people would no longer be forced to take an abusive or exploitative job, because at this point they can just go home and live off of the $1,000 a month if worse comes to worst. but also that people would be able to determine for themselves what kind of work that they want to do. And as a serial entrepreneur, I know that more and more people would do things that they care about in their community. They'd end up doing work that would help move themselves and their families and our society forward, more so than if they're forced to take a job just to survive.
I guess that's where I'm less sure, because I guess I'm unsure whether $1,000 a month in a lot of parts of this country is really the difference between having to take the $19,000 or $22,000 full-time job or not. In other words, we can't give everybody 50,000, right? The numbers just don't work. But at the same time, I'm just not sure that the 12,000 actually provides people that freedom, at least not in a lot of parts of this country.
Well, you're based in Boston, I believe. Like, I'm based in New York, and there are certainly parts of the country where $1,000 goes very, very far. I mean, it's the equivalent of getting paid $6 an hour full time, which is not that far off from what many people are surviving on. And I've spent years in Ohio and Alabama and Michigan, and I was stunned at how reasonable the housing could be on something that's not that different from $1,000 a month. But the other thing is what you're proposing really is that everyone's working for like a handful of corporations that will then try and grind costs down, which is true. That is what many large corporations would be driven to do. Mm-hmm. But you have to think about the way an economy would look in a town, let's say, of 50,000 people, where all of a sudden there's another $60 million in discretionary income. I mean, you'd be looking at many businesses on Main Street and artisanal type businesses that would become much more viable and strengthened if everyone had more purchasing power. And so it's not that everyone would be doing some job for some giant conglomerate. We'd actually see this incredible proliferation of small businesses and Main Street businesses around the country. And those are the jobs that people would end up filling.
Well, that gets me into my other concern directly. And I'm kind of glad you brought it up, which is that I think that there, a lot of big CEO entrepreneurial types have said, I want UBI. We've heard it from Mark Zuckerberg. We've heard it from, I think, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, long list of
not Jeff yet, but
not
Elon,
Jeff Bezos yet. Fair enough. My concern is that even though on paper you might have a community, like you said, you might say, hey, this, Worcester, Massachusetts, there's now an additional $40 million of money available, which is going to go back into the local businesses. A lot of that money, I believe, is going to go back into app purchases and Netflix and Amazon Prime subscriptions and games. And I think that while there is definitely some altruism among some of the billionaires that are saying they like this idea, a lot of them know that a lot of that extra money is going to go to them and not to their local communities. And I wonder if that's a concern to you.
Well, if you think about it, if you think about your own spending, if I gave you $1,000 a month, it'd be actually quite difficult to spend all of that on new apps and media and Netflix consumption. So a lot of it would go towards car repairs, taking your kid out to a movie, like a little bit of savings for someone's college education. I mean, a lot of the money would flow towards things that make the world go round in real life. And the thing, like, it's unfortunate that people look at the motivations of folks who are advocating for universal basic income as a way to somehow question the merits of the idea, because we are talking about plowing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of purchasing power into the hands of the American people that are struggling every day to make ends meet. I mean, the underemployment of recent college graduates is up to 44%, with school loans at a record $1.4 trillion. I mean, that's crippling our younger generation. I know you're familiar with this. 59% of Americans right now can't pay an unexpected $500 bill. So think about the difference that universal basic income would make in people's day-to-day lives. The folks in technology, I mean, you could say like, oh, they're just trying to make their own businesses more socially acceptable, which may totally be the case. But they're also closest to the scene of the automation of jobs. They see their own incentives, they see their own organizations, and they're trying to send up a red flag saying, look, guys, what we've done in the past will not work moving forward, and we need to think much, much bigger. And
yeah,
that's where
I think that there's
too.
two sides to that, though. There's two sides. I think you're right. If Mark Zuckerberg wants UBI, that is not an attack on the merits of UBI. That being said, it's true that if you see a particular group of people advocating for it, it's important to think about the ways in which they might benefit that are not completely obvious to us in evaluating the totality of the idea. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Well, and the thing that you're pointing out is something I could not agree more with, is that more people need to get excited about universal basic income and the difference it would make in their communities. Women should look at it and say, hey, this would be a way to recognize and compensate women for all of the uncompensated work that's done in our households and communities every day. Women would benefit more because women unfortunately get paid less and have lower levels of savings. So women should say universal basic income is great for women. People of color should look at this and say, hey, we have less access to opportunities and less wealth. One study showed that African-American households in America would have a median net worth of 0 by 2050. So people of color should be saying, hey, universal basic income is great for us. We need to take the baton from the tech CEOs and bring it to every other community and say, this is great for humanity, this is great for our society, and let's make it happen. And that's why I'm running for president.
Other angle I want to approach this from and get your feedback to. There is a proposal being developed by economists at London University called Universal Basic Services. What they argue is that if you focus on specific services rather than just cash, that you're going to more directly meet the needs for people that have the lowest income. And they argue that you deliver more value for the same expenditure if you, for example, deliver healthcare to someone that doesn't have it versus cash in the same amount of the services they might otherwise be purchasing. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that a flat UBI is better than a service-based approach?
Sure, there are at least 3 reasons. So the first is that we've been trying to administer, in some ways, a services-based approach over the years, and it just hasn't worked, where like you have vouchers for housing, vouchers for food, vouchers for education in some cases. And we've seen that our programs aren't actually elevating people out of their situations. In many cases, they have perverse incentives attached to them where if they start to flourish, then you don't get it anymore. So one is you got to look at what's working. 2 is you have to look at what our government is actually capable of, where, so for example, some politicians might say we need to educate and retrain Americans for the jobs of the future, ignoring the fact that independent studies show the efficacy levels of government-sponsored retraining to be close to 0%. So if you plow more money into, for example, education programs that may not work, as opposed to giving people purchasing power, that, in my mind, is us talking ourselves into the government being able to do things that it's not going to be able to do. And the third thing is that there is a real access and administration issue where if you have services, inevitably there ends up being some kind of mechanical and elaborate process to access those services. And many people end up struggling with that and getting excluded. And there end up being people that don't get what they're supposed to get under whatever program we devise, whereas straight cash is going to deliver on purchasing power where it's most needed, and people will be able to attend to their needs most directly.
From a legal perspective, Andrew Yang becomes president. Is it executive order? Is it a bill that is developed by Congress? How do you make this a legal reality?
Well, the great thing is that all you need is a majority of Congress. And if I'm president, there will likely have been a blue wave, and so we'll be looking at a Democratic-led Congress. And if the guy who's running on universal basic income becomes president, we all know what's going to happen next, which is that Congress is going to get together and we're going to start rolling it out. So what most people don't realize is that this passed the House of Representatives in 1971 under Richard Nixon, and it stalled in the Senate because of a Democratic senators that wanted a higher income threshold. So there is not any massive legal step one needs to take. It's really just an act of Congress. And something exactly analogous has been in effect in Alaska for 36 years, and it's wildly popular in a Republican state. So this is much more feasible and achievable than most people believe.
We've been speaking with Andrew Yang. He's an author and entrepreneur running as a Democrat for president in 2020. The platform is based on universal basic income, Medicare for all, and human-centered capitalism. Andrew, really great to talk to you. Have been following your work for some time, and it's so great to be able to talk to you about it.
Well, David, it was great being here, and please let's make this a regular occurrence. I'm a big fan of yours and your work.
Thank you. Let's do it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I want to talk about double standards, hypocrisy, ignorance, and general depravity. And no, I'm not talking about the call-in segment during Sean Hannity's radio show today. I'm talking about that infamous Trump Tower meeting. There are sort of two conflicting arguments from Donald Trump, not surprisingly, about the Trump Tower meeting that happened with this Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, with the purpose of getting dirt on Hillary Clinton to help Trump win the election. The first one is, the meeting was totally legal, collusion isn't a crime. The other is, it's actually Hillary who colluded with Russia, and she should be investigated, which of course you would only do if it was a possible crime that was committed. Yesterday on the show, we focused on the second one, right? The countless claims from Donald Trump that Hillary colluded with Russia and should be investigated by Robert Mueller or the FBI or law enforcement or whoever's willing to do it. Today, I want to focus more on the other part of the argument, which is that the meeting at Trump Tower with Russians promising dirt on Hillary Clinton was legal, as Donald Trump has claimed. And this goes back to Donald Trump's tweet over the weekend, where Donald Trump admitted for the first time that the point of the Trump Tower meeting with Russians was not to talk about adoptions, but to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump said in this tweet, quote, "Fake news reporting, a complete fabrication, that I am concerned about the meeting my wonderful son Donald had in Trump Tower. This was a meeting to get information on an opponent, totally legal, and done all the time in politics, and it went nowhere. I did not know about it." There is an excellent article in I believe it's the LA Times, written by former U.S. Attorney and current law professor Harry Litman, along with David Lieberman, where they explain the meeting was not totally legal. Meeting with a foreign power to get help with an American presidential election isn't legal. And this is one of the most precise explanations of the possible criminality I've read so far, and I encourage you to read it as well. There's a federal law, 18 U.S. Code subsection 371, called conspiracy to commit an offense against or to defraud the United States. Some of those Russians indicted by Robert Mueller already were charged under this specific law. And the defrauding of the United States can include, quote, any conspiracy for the purpose of impairing, obstructing, or defeating the lawful function of any department of government, even if the object of the conspiracy is not a criminal offense. Let's see if we can unpack that a little bit. The object of becoming president doesn't need to be a criminal offense. I mean, it isn't, right? Trying to be president is not illegal. But conspiracy to obstruct the way that the Federal Election Commission says elections are supposed to run, for example, not allowing foreign nationals to contribute to elections, including both money and things of value like dirt on Hillary, that's still a crime, even if your end goal, becoming president, is not illegal in and of itself. There's another really important part of conspiracy law. Not only is the objective not relevant, the success of the conspiracy doesn't matter. Trump, even in that tweet I put up for you, insists he never got the dirt on Hillary from Russia. According to the law, as Littman and Lieberman explain, as long as you agreed to pursue the dirt on Hillary from Russia, conspiracy has been committed. And Littman and Lieberman argue that the Trump Tower meeting fits the description of conspiring to defraud the United States, regardless of whether they got the dirt or didn't. This adds, by the way, to the speculation that Don Jr. is in legal trouble. Littman and Lieberman write that Mueller, just based on what's publicly known, could likely already indict Donald Trump Jr. So he should be very worried, even though Trump is saying he's not at all worried because it was totally legal and they didn't get the dirt anyway. Actual law professors say, no, Donald Trump Jr. should be worried. And that's what we've been thinking for the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I mean, but it's going to come down to prosecutorial discretion, right? It's whether or not Mueller wants to press charges against Don Jr. for this. Because, I mean, you know, we kind of joke about this whole they had never worked on a campaign thing. But that is true to some degree. Like maybe he didn't know that that was criminal. And
I don't
Mueller
think that's
could
an
say
excuse.
that we don't want to press charges on him because of this.
You're referring to sort of like the intent element that is
Right.
there when it comes to crimes. In the way that this law appears to be written, regardless of whether you know that it's against the law to do this, regardless of whether what you want help to do isn't illegal, which in this case it's not, becoming president, that it would still be a crime for which one could be indicted. But you are right. I mean, regardless, ultimately, there's going to be significant gray area here for prosecutors to figure out who do they want to charge and with what.
And as you know, this is just about what the public knows. I'm sure there's a
Exactly.
lot more than just the Trump Tower meeting.
No
So
doubt.
we'll have to see.
Not only that, our entire discussion today has been just about conspiracy to defraud. We haven't even touched on possible obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and other crimes. And hopefully Mueller is looking into those. But again, merely on the public knowledge about the Trump Tower meeting, we have legal experts increasingly agreeing that a crime likely has been committed here. We'll see if Trump's lawyers can clean it up for him. Remember that totally disgusting white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, some months ago, where Trump claimed that there were very fine people on both sides, including the side of white supremacy? One of the participants in that rally was a U.S. Marine Lance Corporal, who has now been kicked out of the Marines for participating in the march after spending a month in military jail. I'm talking about Vasilios Pistolis, who was convicted at a court-martial for disobeying orders and making false statements connected to that rally, which, as you recall, left Heather Heyer dead. He wasn't arrested by police at the rally, but he ended up being court-martialed after a report by ProPublica and Frontline PBS showed that he was involved with the Atomwaffen Division and the Traditionalist Worker Party, which are neo-fascist, violent white supremacist groups. He wrote on August 12th, quote, "Today cracked 3 skulls open with virtually no damage to myself." That was the day of that rally. And there are pictures from the event which show him clubbing a counter-protester with what looks to be in this picture like a wooden flagpole. And the right-wing free speech warriors are partially coming to his defense. Not everybody, but some are coming to his defense saying, listen, this is a First Amendment issue, right? This was an individual expressing speech by being at the rally. The military is the government, so it's a violation of the First Amendment for the military to kick this guy out because they're effectively suppressing his speech. Sadly for them, it's just not. I mean, first of all, like I said, he was convicted for disobeying orders and making false statements. He wasn't convicted or kicked out for his views. The military kicked him out because he was convicted and sentenced to a month in military prison.
And I'm not a constitutional expert by any means, but I don't think
you're not?
that,
I didn't know that. I thought you were.
Attacking someone with a flagpole is covered by the First Amendment. Is that free
That's
speech?
speech. That's speech. Absolutely. Attacking someone with a flagpole is speech, and attacking someone with a golf club is also speech. But
Giving money to political campaigns, that's speech too.
It's all speech. So listen, this has nothing to do with his opinions about race or anything else. And again, he wasn't even convicted of the violent acts he was caught doing. If he were convicted of beating someone with a flagpole, that also wouldn't be First Amendment repression if the military said we need him out. So I think that the military did the right thing. If you're curious, double jeopardy doesn't apply to the military and civilian courts. So you could be tried in the military and then in civilian court for the same thing. In this case, if he was tried in civilian court, it would more likely be for the beating of a counter-protester with a wooden flagpole. And this is the right decision by the military. This shouldn't be controversial. You can't have people like this representing the country. If you're a fellow Marine, you shouldn't want this guy serving with you, whether it's in your platoon or even in your office or in the mess hall, wherever it is that you're working. This guy's a systemic danger and could get you killed if you serve with a guy like this. So this is there any strong argument that this isn't obviously the right decision?
And does this guy have any chance at getting a job? It looks like he got dishonorably discharged from the military, or at least that looks like where it's heading. And then he also has white supremacist on his resume.
Sure.
So that doesn't look good to prospective employers.
I was thinking, like, is this going to be an awakening that sets him on a more productive path where he will turn his life around and educate himself about racial who am I kidding? Who am I kidding? Obviously, he's not going to do that. And he'll probably end up diving headfirst into white supremacy and end up in even more trouble. Although we have interviewed on the program 2, 3, or 4 people who have been very deep with violent white supremacist groups, and they did get out of it.
Yeah.
So it is possible, and I hope that he does. I'm just saying statistically it's not the most likely thing.
Maybe in 5 years we'll have him on the program for an interview.
Saved by Reason. What was the Joshua Turner, who has that organization Saved by Reason, who was able to turn it around, which is it's a good thing. I wish him the best, and I hope that he's able to do that. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. A lot of people commenting on YouTube, writing in, tweeting, posting, sending telegrams and smoke signals about Alex Jones and the ban of Alex Jones from YouTube. Here's just one caller's perspective. This isn't everybody's view. This is one perspective about the Alex Jones YouTube ban.
Hey, David, this is Sean from Colorado calling in to give my opinion about Alex Jones because I've been seeing a lot of really stupid commentary. Because I understand the free speech angle, I understand the slippery slope, but people are stupid because they don't understand the real reality behind what Alex Jones is and the inherent danger of Alex Jones. People, like, I'll just be plain about it. If you watch Alex Jones, he's insane. If you don't watch Alex Jones and think he's insane, you're insane or insanely stupid. And to have that constant barrage of just insanity just be there for people to consume and agree with and consider, like, that's a danger.
Yeah. So, okay, I think the point is that there's a lot of insanity going on. It seems like the caller is saying Jones is insane and people who watch him are insane. I don't think that's actually the issue. The real issue fundamentally is, was anything that was done legally problematic? The answer is no. The next question is whether this sets good precedent, and that's where people are split. One side says he undoubtedly violated the terms and conditions. YouTube didn't just go and pick a fight with Alex Jones for no reason. It was probably a combination of the tide publicly turning against his content, combined with the fact that really he had been violating YouTube's terms and conditions for a very long time. That's one side. Nothing happened that was wrong. The other side is, and I am sort of in the middle here, although I've expressed concerns, that whether or if you're not going to literally enforce to the letter every single violation of YouTube's terms and conditions when it comes to edgy content, you open yourself up for significant gray area and subjectivity when it comes to taking actions like this. And that was the concern I expressed yesterday. Most of the audience seemed to agree with me, but still believe that in this particular case, it was very clearly the right decision to ban Alex Jones.
Yeah, I mean, because there are so many examples of him at least potentially breaking the law when it comes to like threats of violence that he's made against individuals, when it comes to defamation. So you can certainly make the case that he has to get off of some of those platforms, and that's under their discretion.
Defamation is civil to the. I believe that defamation is only civil. So to say that it's criminal, it starts to get legally ambiguous. But certainly when he does content that leads to people showing up at Comet Ping Pong and physically threatening the individuals there, that I think is the strongest argument for actual criminal content that Alex Jones has put out. Not everybody in the audience is exactly on the same page, but I do think that there is sort of a coming together on a consensus taking place with the majority of the audience. We have such a good bonus show for you today, which you can access by becoming a member at www.joinpacman.com or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. I hope you'll join, and I hope to speak to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.